What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Gabrielle that has defied many expectations as a Category 4 hurricane north of Bermuda. We also have two other areas of interest that have much better chances of development. We could see a scenario where both systems ultimately develop now more than ever. So we have a lot to discuss with you today, especially with our two new areas of interest, since those do potentially pose a threat to land, especially the western one. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off, we're going to go ahead and go to Gabrielle. What an incredible run this has had right here, ladies and gentlemen. And another thing to note is, going to the public advisory, we actually now have hurricane watches in effect for the Azores Islands. So if you're tuning in from the Azores, you're definitely going to want to watch this system right here as this heads towards your region as a big hurricane. So this is your situation right now. It is a Category 4 hurricane, maximum sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. It's moving east-northeast at 20 miles per hour, and its minimum central pressure is 948 millibars. But man, what an intensity streak it had yesterday. It went from a 90-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane to a 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 in the span of 12 hours, which is just impressive in itself. And ultimately, at that current point, there were actually some estimates that this system may have been even stronger than at 140 miles per hour last night. Some estimates were around 155 miles per hour. We're going to have to wait for the postseason analysis to determine how valid those are. But my goodness, it really turned it up a notch as it moved east of Bermuda, similar to what Hurricane Sam did back in 2021, interesting enough. So that's something to consider as well. But ultimately, here is what we got for you right here. Hurricane force winds extend outward 40 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outward 140 miles from the center. So it's a pretty decent-sized hurricane right here. We are expecting some storm surge, rainfall, and surf in the Azores Islands in the next by Thursday night. So we're going to want to pay attention to those right there. Going to your discussion right here, let's go ahead and briefly go over this. Gabrielle's structure on the GOES 19 mesoscale sector over the hurricane has not changed a lot since the prior advisory, with a very cold distinct eye surrounded by a cold eye wall convection below minus 70 Celsius. However, a recent microwave pass did show that the tilt between the lower level eye and the mid-level eye was starting to increase. Given little change in structure, it is not surprising that subjective and objective satellite intensity estimates have remained steady, thus the initial intensity has been held at 140 miles per hour. While Gabrielle has been resilient against gradually increasing westerly shear, this shear is starting to disrupt its structure ever so slightly, and the tilt observed in microwave imagery is also becoming more evident on GOES visible imagery too. This shear is forecast to soon increase above 20 knots and then increase to 30 knots in the next couple of days. Thus, gradual weakening should begin too, and with the rate of weakening increasing throughout the forecast period. As mentioned previously, the aforementioned trough interaction could provide some baroclinic enhancement and form enhanced upper-level divergence, but should also initiate extratropical transition, which should complete just after it passes the Azores Islands. So that's what we're paying attention to right here. Ultimately, based on what we're seeing, in the next 48 hours, it is forecast to weaken to a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane, but we could see a scenario where we have a high-end Category 1 or low-end Category 2 hurricane crashing into the Azores Islands, which is something we have not seen in a long time. I don't think I've ever seen that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, a system just rapidly intensify like this, move to the east, and head towards the Azores Islands like this. So if you're tuning in from those islands, as well as the rest of Europe, you're definitely going to want to watch this system in the long run. And this cone will explain to you why, because as you see right here, by 8 p.m. Thursday, it is expected to be moving towards towards the Azores Islands right here as either a high-end Category 1 or low-end Category 2, move through those islands, and then transition into an extratropical cyclone as it approaches Portugal and Spain right here, and then potentially cause some impacts for the rest of Western Europe over here. So this looks like it's going to be one of those systems that kind of doesn't do anything out to sea, but then starts to impact parts of the Azores and then heads towards Europe and brings impacts over there. So if you're tuning in from those countries, you're absolutely going to want to watch Gabrielle, as this does pose a threat for you guys in the long run. But ultimately, the evolution of this system has surprised me quite a bit, because before we were expecting this to head towards Greenland and Iceland with the track models and the intensity. Now it's because there's a massive ridge building up. You're looking at the system just shifting further and further and further to the south towards the Azores Islands and Western Europe, and that is going to bring more impacts to those regions. Potentially the United Kingdom and Ireland will want to watch out for this as well. So those are things that you're going to want to consider, and we will keep you updated on this impact path here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But that is not the only story for today. We have two other areas of interest in the one just near the Lesser Antilles and one near in the main development region that we are going to want to watch out for. And both of them have shown increasing probabilities of tropical development, especially over the last 36 hours. So we're going to go ahead and watch this. But we are going to go ahead and talk about Invest 93 and Invest 94L for you guys right here. These are two invests right here that both could have a good chance of tropical development at this current point. So let's go ahead and start with 94L, then we'll go to 93L in just a second. A tropical wave is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms and gusty winds across much of the Windward and Leeward Islands. The wave is expected to move west-northwestward at 15 to 20 miles per hour, spreading heavy rainfall and gusty winds to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands tonight and Wednesday. The system is then forecast to slow down, then turn northwestward, and as it reaches the southwestern Atlantic near the Bahamas late this week. And a tropical depression could form when the disturbance is in that region. Interests in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the Bahamas should monitor the progress of the system. And I would also say the East Coast should definitely watch this as well. That's just my own commentary at the end of it. 20% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 60% in the next 7 days. So that's something you're going to want to watch out for. And then you have this other area of interest over here, just a little bit further a ways out in the main development region, that has an even better shot at tropical development. Invest 93L, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we have for you right here, and this is what we got. Shower and thunderstorm activity associated with a tropical wave located a little less than 1,000 miles east of the Lesser Antilles continues to show signs of organization. Environmental conditions are forecast to be favorable for development over the next several days, and a tropical depression is likely to form by the latter half of this week while the system moves west-northwestward to northwestward into the western tropical Atlantic. 50% in the next 48 hours, 90% in the next 7 days. So we're definitely going to want to watch out for that and pay attention to it moving on. So that's what we're looking at in the Atlantic. Invest 93L in particular is a hurricane contender in my opinion. 94L, we need to figure out and iron out a few more details before we go that far. But by and large, these both have a really good chance of tropical development. They're moving into a better environment. And those are two that you're going to want to watch. 93L could make some people uncomfortable, and 94L could definitely impact a lot of people. So that's what we're dealing with right here in the Atlantic. So let's go ahead now and shift over to satellite imagery. So here's what we have for you right here. Across the Atlantic, Gabrielle is over here. We have 93L in the main development region and 94L impacting much of the Lesser Antilles right here. We're going to go ahead and start with Gabrielle and then give a quick analysis. Then we're going to get to 93 and 94L. So let's go ahead now and shift over to this right here. I got to show you this right here just while we're here. We're going to go ahead and go back to the last two. Hopefully we can go back this far. Oh yeah, we actually can. We actually are back to the last 200 frames of this right here. This is the last day and a half that we have right here just to show you what has been going on. So you had the system really intensify very fast right here, starting to get its eye popped out at the time we recorded the video yesterday, and then you really started seeing the eye clearing out as the morning emerged and this moved east of Bermuda. By 10 a.m., we were at a Category 3 hurricane as the eye became a lot less ragged and a lot more circular, and then really blew up in the afternoon as it produced more and more convection. We are at Category 4 strength at this current time, the near perfect structure for this at this point, using the trough angle, using the jet to really enhance its intensity and produce and pull similar to what Hurricane Sam did back in 2021, where at least the second time when it intensified. The first time, it was a small system. It blew up to a 155 mile per hour hurricane officially. A lot of us think it was actually a Category 5, but we don't really have recon to back that up. Just the satellite presentation looked really well, and the dropsons we did have with Sam ultimately flew into the mesovortices, and that's why we couldn't get an accurate reading with that. In terms of what we saw the second time, it went from a Category 3 and quickly got up to a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 150 miles per hour just around this latitude as it was approaching Bermuda. And I remember back in 2021, this was my second big story right here that I was covering right here. I thought, yeah, maybe it will strengthen more, but it won't get up to 150. It turns out I was wrong with that, so that was the first time I was wrong on the Pat's Path Predictor channel history. A little bit of history right there, but ultimately, the point I'm trying to make with you this is this is a very Sam-esque type situation back, and it's also a similar time frame as well, late September as well, and originated from the same area as well before curving out to sea. So that's just something to keep in mind. But then, as time went on, as you can see, the structure really did not change that much. The eye only got smaller overnight, and yeah, you did see the shear starting to chip away at the structure. Definitely seeing that a lot more now than you were previously. You're definitely seeing that westerly shear really impacted, especially as you notice this start getting chipped away right here. But by and large, it's been off to it was a phenomenal showing we had yesterday, and I wanted to go ahead and show you that. But shear is starting to chip away at the structure. You can kind of see that already, but ultimately still a very powerful Category 4 hurricane, and the Azores definitely need to watch out for this. Next thing we're going to go ahead and show you is the areas of interest, and we'll go ahead and pick those two apart in terms of the satellite presentation. Here's Invest 93L. It needs to get its act together. It needs to organize before it can develop. It's just a blob of convection right here that we're dealing with. A lot of this popcorn and convection, like I've talked about a lot in my previous analyses, both with this as well as other areas of interest as well. What it needs to do is produce convection near the center of circulation, get its act together, start to consolidate, and then it'll become a tropical cyclone. It's going to take some more time to do that. I think we're not going to see development probably until past Thursday evening based on this current presentation and the conditions it has ahead of it. So that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind. But there are some positives with 93L, at least in terms of the development, not in terms of potential impacts. The development side of things, well, you have pretty considerable outflow that's already starting to generate right here. That's a good sign of the system's health right here. You're also seeing the system still producing a lot of convection, and at least for what we're seeing right here, taking advantage of a relatively moist environment right here. And that outflow over here is definitely starting to chip away at the dry air that's kind of starting to intrude a little bit in this part of the Atlantic. So as long as that moisture and as long as that outflow continues to generate that, as well as the storm continues to produce convection at a regular level, it's going to have a really good chance of tropical development, especially sooner rather than later, excuse me. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to consider, and we will continue to keep you updated on. So that's 93L. What's 94L doing? Well, 94L, the majority of the convection is actually to the south, into the east of the center of circulation right here. One thing that we're watching right here is this low pressure system over north of the Dominican Republic. Let's actually go ahead and go to the Western Atlantic just to show you this. We have this low pressure system kind of trying to get producing a lot of convection over north of the DR right here, and that could be producing some wind shear. As long as this system moves through that and moves past this low pressure system right here and gets through the wind shear, this system will have no problem developing, in my opinion, because it'll have low wind shear, it'll have ample moisture. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and pull this up. Yeah, it's going to have ample moisture, in part because of the convection this low is generating right here, and in part because you have a lot more convection kind of firing off right here. And an active MJO as well in this part of the Atlantic as well has also been very beneficial in this as well. So that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to. But by and large, both of these areas of interest have a really good chance of development, and those would be our H and our I named storms if they do both develop and get named. So that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind. I know a lot of people talk about the I curse right here. Last year, we kind of got introduced with the H curse, Helene, but the I curse was definitely something we've noticed since 2017. Irma was an infamous example of that. Imelda in 2019 was a tropical storm, produced nearly 40 inches of flash flooding in Texas. We also had Isaias in 2020 that just caused havoc in the Carolinas and much of the East Coast. We had Ida in 2021 that just destroyed much of Louisiana and flooded the northeastern United States. Ian in 2022, the Category 5 offshore, made landfall as a Cat 4 and then started to cause a lot of damage down Florida. I remember watching that. I remember actually going down there and gutting homes from Hurricane Ian. Idalia in 2023 as well. That's another one that we need to look out for and talk about as well. Caused a lot of problems in the Big Bend region in Florida. So that's something you're going to want to watch out for. The H and the I named storms are coming up with 93 and 94L, and we're going to want to pay attention to it. Now the main question is, which one's going to get the H named storm and which one's going to get the I named storm? And based on the current forecast models as well as the NHC guidance, I think the H named storm will be 93L and the I named storm will be 94L. And I'll go ahead and explain that to you as we show you these forecast models. Here is the European for you guys right here. European has Gabrielle moving towards the Azores Islands right here, not really paying attention to the intensity. It's significantly underestimating it right here based on observations. And it does head towards the Azores Islands and potentially either makes a landfall or close pass to a couple of the islands right here. But pay attention to this part of the southwestern Atlantic right here. You're not going to see that much development maybe for the next 48 to 72 hours, but you do see two closed lows starting to develop, one near the Turks and Caicos and another more so out to sea. We have this low pressure system getting tagged, but it's still relatively broad, needs to organize. This system right here gets organized relatively quickly. Right here, and I think the H named storm will be this one right here, Invest 93L, and then you have your I named storm that starts to kind of pop up here and there, really starts to tighten up in its circulation. The H named storm mainly stays out to sea as a hurricane, but the I named storm, at least according to what we're seeing right here, 94L, does crash into North Carolina and parts of Virginia as well, while this area of interest kind of becomes a big hurricane, a major hurricane rather, and then moves out to sea from there. So that's something you're going to want to watch. That is your European run. Let's go ahead now and show you the GFS. GFS has been pretty interesting to say as well. Let's go ahead and pull this up for you guys right here. GFS, similar situation. It does want 93L to get its act together, organize, and develop. Although the GFS doesn't really have it as strong as the European. It has it more broad and takes its time to consolidate. Looking at this right here, I think it does have a Fujiwara effect going on with 93 and 94L, which is why it takes so long to organize and strengthen, and that's why it's so broad. And it doesn't really strengthen until it becomes an extratropical low, so that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. Let's go ahead and show you the Canadian run. What is that showing for you guys? Canadian is pretty interesting, has both of them actually developing. They both actually get up to hurricane strength, as a matter of fact, right here, and you do have much of the Bahamas getting impacted by 94L as likely a Category 1 hurricane, but you do have these getting close together, and that's going to kind of trigger potentially a Fujiwara effect type of situation right there, and the Canadian just kind of has both of them go out to sea. But you are paying attention to this right here. You're going to want to keep a very close eye on this right here as well, especially if you're in the Bahamas and in the east coast of the United States. Lastly, we'll go ahead and show you the icon. Here's the 12Z icon. Both these systems develop as well. Actually get pretty powerful right here, but then they do emerge as a Fujiwara effect. Okay, yeah. What is the icon on right now? What kind of stuff is the icon on? It wants two major hurricanes to develop at 12Z. What's the 0Z showing, just for context? Yeah, this is a lot more believable in my opinion. I do not see two major hurricanes forming that close to each other. Otherwise, we'd have a massive issue. But But by and large, you are looking at both of these areas of interest. You're looking at a much better environment for these to organize and develop, and those are factors that we're going to want to pay attention to, and we will keep you updated on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we are going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. We'd really like you guys to come on. We'd like to show you some behind the scenes stuff and hopefully get some new members and hopefully a little bit more help. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.